The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., and Chris Pratt's hand instinctively reached for the snooze button. For once, there was no personal assistant rushing in to remind him about morning interviews, no makeup artist waiting in the next room, and no carefully crafted breakfast prepared by his private chef. Today was different. Today, Christopher Michael Pratt, star of Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World, was attempting something far more challenging than battling CGI dinosaurs or saving the galaxy. He was trying to be normal. The idea had come to him yesterday during a conversation with his son Jack. "Dad, what's it like to just be regular?" the 9-year-old had asked, genuine curiosity sparkling in his eyes. Chris had opened his mouth to answer but found himself at a loss for words. When was the last time he'd truly experienced a regular day? The question had haunted him through the night, leading to this somewhat impulsive experiment. Standing before his walk-in closet, Chris pushed past the designer suits and custom-made outfits, reaching for the most ordinary clothes he could find: a pair of slightly worn jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and an old baseball cap he'd bought at a gas station years ago. No stylist had selected these pieces, no brand was paying him to wear them, and that somehow made them perfect for today's mission. "Okay, Pratt," he muttered to himself, studying his reflection in the mirror. "Today, you're just Chris from Virginia, Minnesota. No Star-Lord, no Owen Grady, no Hollywood star. Just a regular guy trying to get through a regular day." He'd even left his wedding ring at home, not because he wanted to hide his marriage, but because the massive diamond-encrusted band would definitely draw attention. The first challenge presented itself immediately: transportation. His garage housed a collection of luxury vehicles that would make any car enthusiast drool, but none of them screamed "ordinary guy." After a moment's hesitation, Chris pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done in years: he downloaded a ride-sharing app. While waiting for his ride, he scribbled down his rules for the day: no personal security, for the first time in years, no reservations, no VIP treatment, and most importantly, no pulling the "don't you know who I am" card, no matter how tempting it might become. The goal was to experience life as it was before fame, before Marvel, before his face appeared on billboards and action figures. The ride-sharing app chimed, announcing that his driver, Sarah, was 5 minutes away. Chris felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness in his stomach. It was ridiculous, really. He'd performed in front of millions, handled high-pressure interviews, and carried billion-dollar franchises on his shoulders. Yet somehow, the prospect of navigating a day as a normal person felt more daunting than any of those challenges. His phone buzzed with a text from his agent: "Are you sure about this? At least let me send Miguel to tail you." Chris typed a quick "I'm sure" and turned off his phone. The whole point was to strip away the protective bubble that fame had built around him. A modest Toyota Camry pulled into his driveway, and Chris took a deep breath. The moment he stepped into that car, his experiment would begin. No script, no directors, no carefully orchestrated public appearances, just Christopher Michael Pratt attempting to remember what it felt like to be unremarkable. As he reached for the door handle, he caught his reflection in the window and smiled. There was something both terrifying and liberating about what he was about to do. In a world where his every move was photographed, analyzed, and commented upon, could he actually pull off being invisible for a day? The car door opened with a slight creak, and Chris slid into the back seat, pulling his cap lower over his eyes. "Good morning," the driver said cheerfully, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "Where to?" For a moment, Chris hesitated. Where would a regular person go on a regular morning in Los Angeles? The answer came to him suddenly, bringing a smile to his face. "The nearest Starbucks, please," he said, then quickly added, "Actually, make that the second nearest. The one that's not on any celebrity tours." As the car pulled away from his house, Chris couldn't shake the feeling that this day would either be a complete disaster or the most enlightening experience he'd had in years. Either way, he was about to find out what it truly meant to be regular, in a world that had long since forgotten how to treat him as anything but extraordinary. Little did he know, his attempt at anonymity was about to turn into an adventure that would make fighting aliens seem like a walk in the park. But that's the thing about normal days, they have a funny way of becoming extraordinary when you least expect it. The Starbucks that Sarah dropped him off at was tucked between a laundromat and a discount shoe store, definitely not the kind of place that made it onto celebrity Instagram feeds. Chris joined the line of morning commuters, each lost in their own world of phones and earbuds. For the first time in years, nobody was looking at him. The feeling was both foreign and oddly comforting. That comfort lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Grande iced caramel macchiato for Jessica, called out the barista, and the woman collecting her drink did a double take so dramatic it nearly sent her coffee flying. Chris could practically see the gears turning in her head. Is that? No, it couldn't be. But maybe. He pulled his cap lower and focused intently on the menu board, pretending to be fascinated by the difference between a latte and a flat white. Jessica was now frantically typing on her phone, probably updating her social media status or texting friends. Chris could feel the comfortable anonymity of the morning beginning to crack. The line moved forward, and he found himself behind a man in a business suit who was barking stock trades into his phone. In front of him, a young woman in yoga clothes was ordering what had to be the most complicated coffee combination Chris had ever heard. "I'd like a venti, sugar-free, non-fat, no whip, extra hot, half-sweet, double shot, upside-down caramel macchiato with light ice and extra foam." Chris couldn't help but smile. In his regular life, he had people who handled his coffee runs. He suddenly realized he hadn't actually ordered his own coffee in a coffee shop for years. The pressure was on, he needed to sound like he knew what he was doing. When it was finally his turn, he stepped up to the counter, coming face to face with a barista whose name tag read Marcus. The teenager's eyes widened slightly, but to his credit, he maintained his professional composure. "Welcome to Starbucks, what can I get started for you today?" "Hi, Chris cleared his throat, trying to channel his inner regular guy. "Could I get just a regular coffee? Medium? I mean, grande?" He winced internally at how uncertain he sounded. Star-Lord would never fumble ordering a simple coffee. Marcus nodded, his professional demeanor cracking slightly as a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Would you like room for cream?" "Yes, please," Chris replied, relieved to be asked a straightforward question he could answer. Then he remembered something else. "And maybe one of those breakfast sandwiches? The one with bacon?" Behind him, the whispers had started. He could feel phones being raised, hear the subtle clicks of camera apps being opened. The carefully constructed bubble of normalcy was rapidly deflating. Marcus, bless his soul, was trying his best to treat this like any other transaction, but his hands were shaking slightly as he wrote on the cup. "That'll be $8.75. Chris reached for his wallet and felt his stomach drop. In his attempt to be normal, he'd grabbed an old wallet that morning, one that contained exactly $3 in cash and a maxed-out Blockbuster card from 2007. His regular wallet, with his credit cards and cash, was sitting in the drawer next to his discarded wedding ring. The line behind him was growing, and so was the number of phones pointed in his direction. The businessman had stopped his stock trades and was now very obviously trying to snap a photo while pretending to check his email. Jessica from earlier had circled back around and was now browsing, the coffee mugs displayed suspiciously close to where Chris stood. Chris patted his pockets, feeling his face grow hot. Here he was, worth millions, and he couldn't even pay for a simple coffee. "I seem to have." Before he could finish his sentence, a hand reached around him, holding out a $10 bill. "I've got it," said a voice, and Chris turned to find himself face to face with an elderly woman who barely came up to his shoulder. She had to be at least 80, with silver hair and kind eyes behind cat-eye glasses. "Oh, no, I couldn't." Chris started to protest, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Nonsense. My grandson loves your movies. He's going through some tough times right now, and your Star-Lord character always makes him smile. Consider this a thank you." She pressed the money into Marcus's hand before Chris could object further. The simple act of kindness, offered without expectation of anything in return, caught Chris completely off guard. In his regular life, people were always trying to give him things, but usually with strings attached: photo ops, social media mentions, contract negotiations. This was different. This was genuine. As he waited for his order, the number of people in the store had somehow doubled. The whispers had become a buzz of excitement, and he could already see a small crowd gathering outside the window. His experiment in normalcy was rapidly derailing. "Grande Pike Place and bacon sandwich." Marcus called out, and Chris stepped forward to collect his order. As he reached for the items, Marcus whispered, "There's a back door through the kitchen, if you need it. My manager won't mind." Chris looked at the growing crowd, then at his coffee, then at the elderly woman who was now calmly sipping her own drink in the corner. He had a choice to make: take the escape route and preserve what was left of his experiment, or stay and face what was quickly becoming a very public morning. The answer came to him as he caught sight of his reflection in the store window. The baseball cap had shifted, his attempt at a disguise now slightly askew, much like his plan for a normal day. Maybe being regular wasn't about blending in perfectly. Maybe it was about handling regular situations with grace, even when they didn't go as planned. He straightened his cap, took a deep breath, and made his decision. The day was young, and he had a feeling this was just the first of many challenges ahead. After all, he still had to figure out how to take the bus. After politely declining 14 selfie requests and accepting a handmade bracelet from a young girl who swore it would protect him from raptors, Chris finally made it out of the Starbucks. The elderly woman who'd paid for his coffee had slipped away during the commotion, leaving him with a strange mix of gratitude and regret that he couldn't properly thank her. Her simple act of kindness kept replaying in his mind as he walked to the nearest bus stop, sipping his now lukewarm coffee. The bus stop consisted of a worn metal bench beneath a faded plastic shelter covered in local concert posters and advertisements for personal injury lawyers. Chris sat down next to a teenager who was completely absorbed in a dog-eared copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The kid didn't even look up, a small victory for Operation Normal Guy. That's when Chris realized he had no idea how to actually take the bus. Did you pay when you got on or off? How much did it cost? Did buses take credit cards? He pulled out his phone, then remembered he'd turned it off. Just as he was considering turning it back on, an older man sitting on the other end of the bench spoke up. "First time taking the 720, the man asked, gesturing to Chris's confused expression. He wore a Metro employee uniform with the name Earl embroidered on the pocket. "That obvious, huh?" Chris replied, grateful for the conversation. "Son, I've been driving buses in LA for 30 years. I know a first-timer when I see one." Earl paused, studying Chris's face. "You know, you look just like that fella from the dinosaur movies. My granddaughter loves those films." Chris's heart rate picked up, but Earl just chuckled and continued, "But that guy wouldn't be caught dead waiting for the 720, would he? Anyway, it's $1.75, exact change only. When you see the bus coming, just have your money ready and drop it in the box by the driver." Before Chris could respond, a distinctive rumble announced the arrival of what looked like a building on wheels. The bus pulled up with a hydraulic hiss, its brakes squealing slightly. The doors opened, and Earl stood up, revealing that he wasn't just a helpful stranger, he was their driver. "Well, come on then," Earl called out, already climbing into the driver's seat. "Unless you're waiting for a different bus?" Chris fumbled in his pockets, finding 2 crumpled dollar bills, probably left over from that time he played a prank on Chris Evans by filling his trailer with dollar store items. As he boarded the bus, he realized he was short on the fare. Earl waved him on with a knowing smile. "First ride's on me. Consider it a welcome to public transportation. Just don't make a habit of it." The bus was about half full, a mix of commuters, students, and what appeared to be a man having an intense debate with his sock puppet about climate change. Chris made his way down the aisle, trying to remember the last time he'd been on a bus. Had it been during filming? No, those were usually luxury coaches. Maybe back in his community college days? He chose a seat near the middle, next to a window spotted with rain from yesterday's unexpected shower. The teenager from the bus stop sat across the aisle, still engrossed in his book. Two elderly ladies in the front were discussing their grandchildren's dating lives at a volume that suggested they thought everyone needed to hear their opinions on modern romance. As the bus lurched into motion, Chris found himself oddly fascinated by the way the city looked from this vantage point. Usually, he saw Los Angeles through tinted car windows or from high-rise hotel rooms. But from here, at street level, wedged between a woman knitting what appeared to be a sweater for her iguana and a businessman trying to balance his laptop on his knees, the city felt different. More real somehow. The peaceful moment lasted exactly 8 minutes. Oh my God! The shriek came from somewhere behind him. It's Chris Pratt. The businessman's laptop nearly went flying. The iguana sweater lady dropped a stitch. The sock puppet abruptly stopped its climate change debate. And the teenager finally looked up from his book, eyes widening in recognition. Phones emerged from pockets and bags like flowers blooming in fast motion. The bus, which had been its own little ecosystem of quiet morning commuters, erupted into chaos. Someone started playing the Jurassic World theme music on their phone. A woman who had appeared to be sleeping suddenly produced a Guardians of the Galaxy DVD from her purse, along with a Sharpie. Earl's voice crackled over the intercom. Now folks, let's remember this is the 720, not the Hollywood tour bus. Everyone stay seated. But it was too late. People were already moving across the aisle, squeezing into nearby seats, all trying to get closer to Chris. The teenager with the book had pulled out his phone and was live streaming. You guys won't believe who I'm sitting next to on the bus right now. Chris looked out the window, watching the city roll by. He could see people on the sidewalk pointing as the bus passed, probably wondering why there was such a commotion inside. This wasn't exactly the low-key bus ride he'd been hoping for. Then he caught sight of his reflection in the window again, and something clicked. The whole point of this experiment wasn't really about being invisible, it was about understanding regular life. And sometimes regular life meant dealing with unexpected situations, just like everyone else on this bus probably had to do at some point. So instead of trying to hide or asking Earl to let him off at the next stop, Chris did something that surprised even himself. He turned to the teenager with the book and asked, "So, what's your favorite part of Hitchhiker's Guide so far?" The kid's live stream forgotten, his face lit up as he launched into an enthusiastic explanation of why the Babel fish was the greatest plot device ever invented. Gradually, the excitement in the bus shifted. Phones lowered. The previous conversations resumed, albeit with occasional glances in his direction. By the time Earl announced his stop, Chris had signed 3 DVDs, taken a selfie with the sock puppet, at its insistence, and learned more about iguana sweater measurements than he ever thought possible. As he stood to leave, the teenager handed him a piece of paper, a bus schedule. "For next time," the kid said with a grin. Chris tucked the schedule into his pocket, thanked Earl, and stepped off the bus onto a street he didn't recognize. He had no idea where he was, his phone was still off, and it was only 10 a.m. Somewhere in the distance, he could see a grocery store sign glowing in the morning sun. Well, he thought, regular people need to buy groceries, right? How hard could that be? The answer, as he was about to find out, was very hard indeed. The automatic doors of Save Mart slid open with a wheezing sound that suggested they'd been doing this job since before Chris had started his acting career. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the slightly scuffed linoleum floors. This was definitely not Eruhan Market or Whole Foods, this was a regular grocery store where regular people bought regular groceries. Chris grabbed a shopping cart, its left front wheel squeaking in protest as he pushed it forward. He'd been in grocery stores before, of course, but usually as part of a movie scene, with a carefully choreographed route and a production assistant making sure all the brands were camera-ready. This was different. This was overwhelming. "You want a circular, honey?" An employee in a red vest was holding out a paper flyer. Her name tag read Dorothy, and she had the kind of weathered smile that suggested she'd been offering circulars to confused shoppers for decades. "We've got good deals on produce today." "Thanks," Chris said, accepting the flyer and trying to look like he knew what to do with it. The front page advertised something called BOGO deals, which he assumed wasn't a new type of organic superfood. He started in the produce section, figuring it was as good a place as any to begin. He was studying an avocado with the intensity usually reserved for script reading when he heard a small voice behind him. "Mommy, that man is squeezing all the avocados wrong." Chris turned to find a little girl, maybe 6 years old, shaking her head disapprovingly. Her mother was mortified, but the girl continued, "You're supposed to press gently with your thumb, like this." She demonstrated on a nearby avocado with the confidence of a master chef. "Emma, we don't correct strangers," her mother started to say, then did a double take as she recognized Chris. Before she could say anything, he crouched down to the girl's level. "Thank you for teaching me," he said seriously. "I'm kind of new at this. Any other produce tips?" Emma's face lit up. For the next 10 minutes, she gave Chris a detailed tour of the produce section, explaining everything from how to thump watermelons, "It should sound like knocking on a door," to why you should never pick the prettiest tomatoes, "They're trying too hard." By the time Emma and her still stunned mother moved on to the dairy section, Chris had a cart full of perfectly selected fruits and vegetables. He'd also attracted a small crowd of onlookers, all pretending to be very interested in the organic cucumber display while sneaking photos. Moving to the next aisle, Chris consulted his circular. The BOGO deals, he'd learned from Emma, meant, buy one, get one free. He was studying the fine print on a pasta sauce offer when he heard crashes from the next aisle, followed by a string of colorful language that would have gotten bleeped on network television. Without thinking, Chris rushed around the corner to find an elderly man trying to reach a box of cereal on the top shelf. Several boxes had already fallen, creating a multicolored heap of breakfast food on the floor. "Let me help you with that," Chris offered, easily reaching the top shelf. The man squinted at him. "Thanks, young fellow. Say, you look familiar. Weren't you in that movie with the talking raccoon?" "Actually, he's not technically a raccoon," Chris started to explain, then caught himself. "I mean, no, but I get that a lot." The man shrugged. "Well, whoever you are, you're a good kid. My arthritis makes it hard to reach up there these days." He paused. "Though I have to say, that raccoon was the best part of those space movies." Chris spent the next few minutes helping the man pick out his cereal while simultaneously defending Rocket's honor without admitting he knew the character personally. By the time they finished, 3 store employees had arrived to clean up the cereal spill, all trying very hard not to stare. The rest of his shopping experience became a strange mix of trying to figure out regular grocery shopping while inadvertently creating small scenes throughout the store. He helped a teenager decide which protein powder was the best value, having learned about nutrition during his Marvel training, advised a couple on their date night dinner ingredients, drawing from his pre-fame experience as a waiter, and explained to a very persistent 9-year-old that no, he couldn't actually train raptors. When he finally made it to the checkout line, his cart was full of an eclectic mix of items, some from Emma's produce masterclass, the BOGO pasta sauce he'd figured out, and various things he'd picked up while helping other shoppers. The cashier, a young man with bright blue hair, rang everything up with professional efficiency until he got to the avocados. "Did you find everything okay?" the cashier asked, then looked up and dropped the avocado he was weighing. "Holy sh, shiitake mushrooms." "Actually," Chris said, picking up the fallen avocado and demonstrating the proper gentle thumb pressure, "I had some excellent help with the produce selection." The total came to $127.84, and Chris realized with a sinking feeling that he still didn't have his credit cards. He was about to admit defeat when a familiar voice behind him said, "Oh good, I caught you." It was Dorothy from the entrance, now off duty and holding her own shopping basket. "I was hoping you'd still be here," she said, pulling out what looked like a well-loved DVD case of Parks and Recreation, Season 2. "My daughter and I used to watch this together before she went off to college. Would you mind signing it? Also, you dropped this earlier." She held out a crisp $100 bill. Chris knew for certain he hadn't dropped any money, but Dorothy's wink told him all he needed to know. It was another act of kindness, like the coffee and the bus fare, offered with genuine warmth rather than expectation. As he signed the DVD and paid for his groceries, Chris realized that his experiment in normalcy had revealed something unexpected. Maybe being regular wasn't about blending in perfectly or doing everything right. Maybe it was about these small moments of connection, these tiny acts of kindness that made up the fabric of everyday life. Now he just had to figure out how to carry all these grocery bags to wherever he was going next. He stepped out of the store into the afternoon sun, arms full of bags, no car in sight, and his phone still stubbornly turned off in his pocket. A city bus rumbled past, and Chris remembered the schedule the teenager had given him. Maybe, he thought, it was time to give public transportation another try. After all, this was how regular people did it, right? What he didn't notice was the small news van pulling into the parking lot, responding to the social media buzz about a certain movie star's unexpected shopping spree at Save Mart. His experiment in normalcy was about to face its biggest challenge yet. The sight of the news van sent Chris into a moment of panic. Through the store's windows, he could see Dorothy giving him a sympathetic look as she clutched her signed DVD. His experiment in normalcy had somehow turned into breaking news. Famous actor attempts to live like regular person, creates chaos instead, would probably be the headline. He was standing there, arms full of grocery bags, contemplating his options, when a familiar rattling engine sound caught his attention. The 720 bus was pulling up to the stop across the street, and behind the wheel was Earl, raising an eyebrow at Chris's predicament. "Need a lift?" Earl called out through the open door. Chris had never been so happy to see a bus in his life. He hurried across the street, grocery bags swinging, just as the first reporter emerged from the news van with a microphone at the ready. The bus wasn't as crowded as it had been during the morning rush, but the passengers who were there immediately recognized him, especially since his previous ride had probably racked up 1 million views on social media by now. But something was different this time. Instead of chaos erupting, a young woman simply stood up and offered her seat, gesturing to his many grocery bags. "Thanks," Chris said, settling in with his bags clustered around his feet. A few phones were out, recording the scene, but nobody approached him. It was as if his fellow passengers had silently agreed to let him just be. That's when his own phone, still turned off in his pocket, suddenly felt very heavy. He thought about all the missed calls, the concerned messages, probably a few angry ones from his agent. He thought about his son Jack's question that had started all of this: what's it like to be regular? Finally, he understood what he wanted to tell his son. The bus rolled through the afternoon traffic as Chris watched the city pass by. The sock puppet debater from the morning was gone, replaced by a group of high school students practicing what seemed to be a chemistry rap. The iguana sweater lady had been succeeded by a man reading poetry to his succulent plant. Earl navigated through traffic with the skill of someone who had driven these streets for decades, calling out stops in a soothing rhythm that felt almost musical. When they passed a small park, Chris pulled the stop request cord. He gathered his groceries, thanked Earl again, and stepped out into the warm afternoon sun. The news van was nowhere in sight, they'd probably lost him in traffic. He found a bench near a playground where parents were watching their kids climb and swing and imagine. Setting his groceries down, he finally turned on his phone. As expected, it exploded with notifications, messages, and missed calls. But instead of anxiety, he felt a strange sense of peace. He called Jack first. "Dad," his son answered immediately. "You're all over TikTok. Someone said you were taking the bus and helping people pick avocados." Chris laughed. "Yeah, buddy, I've had quite a day. Remember when you asked me what it's like to be regular? Well, I thought I needed to become invisible to understand it. I thought being regular meant nobody noticing you, everything being simple and quiet. But I was wrong." He watched a father teaching his daughter how to throw a frisbee, the two of them laughing as it sailed in the wrong direction. Being regular isn't about being invisible. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. He told Jack about the elderly woman who bought his coffee, about Earl and the bus rides, about Emma's produce lessons, and about Dorothy's kindness with the DVD and the money. Being regular means you're part of a community where people help each other out, not because you're famous or special, but just because that's what people do. Sometimes you're the one helping, sometimes you're the one being helped, but you're always connected. "Did you hate it?" Jack asked. "Not being treated like a movie star?" Chris thought about the genuine interactions he'd had throughout the day, the small moments of connection that had nothing to do with his fame. "Actually, buddy, I think I learned more about being a star today than I have in years of making movies." His phone buzzed with another call, probably his agent again, but he ignored it. "Hey Jack, want to help me make dinner? I got all these groceries, and I learned exactly how to pick out the perfect tomatoes. Can we invite Grandma? She always says your cooking is dangerous." "Sure," Chris laughed. "And maybe tomorrow, if you want, we could take the bus to school together. I know a really great driver named Earl." As he gathered his groceries and began walking home, yes, walking, because that's what regular people sometimes did, Chris realized that his experiment hadn't gone at all as planned. He hadn't managed to be invisible or ordinary, but he'd discovered something more valuable instead. The next morning, when Chris and Jack boarded Earl's bus together, Chris wearing the same baseball cap and carrying 2 cups of coffee, he'd remembered cash this time. Jack looked around the bus with wide eyes. "Dad," he whispered, though not very quietly, "is this what being regular feels like?" Chris watched as Earl greeted them with a knowing smile, as the other passengers tried to hide their surprised looks, as the city rolled past the windows. "No, buddy," he said. "This is what being real feels like." And somewhere in Los Angeles, a grandmother was showing her grandson a signed Parks and Recreation DVD, a little girl was teaching her mother the proper way to check avocados, and a teenager on a bus was still live streaming about the day Chris Pratt learned that sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can do is simply be yourself.
Tell us in the comments what part of this story impressed you the most. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next videos. See you in the world of incredible events.